He brought his mistresses to court to watch me lose everything. Sat there in his navy suit, pen ready to sign away my dignity. To him, this was more than just a divorce. It was his final chance to crush me, to prove to everyone in the room that I was powerless without him. His lawyer whispered something, and he chuckled under his breath, not even bothering to look my way. I lifted my chin, refusing to let him see the tears burning at the back of my eyes. He thought today was his victory lap. He thought I'd walk away humiliated, empty-handed and broken. But what Daniel didn't know was that my dead father had left me one final weapon that would destroy him in front of everyone. This wasn't the end of my story. This was the beginning of his reckoning. Welcome back, my family and friends. I have missed you all so much. Thank you for sticking around with me. I truly appreciate your love and support. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to click the subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now let's continue. Before the courtroom, before the whispers, before the betrayal, I was just a woman who believed in love. When I first met Daniel, he wasn't the smug, calculating man now sitting across from me. He was charming, attentive, and seemed like every dream I had prayed for. He held doors open, remembered the little things, and spoke about the future as though I was his destiny. My father, stern but kind, had warned me to take my time. A man's true heart isn't shown in the season of romance, my daughter. It's revealed when life tests him. But I was young, in love, and certain that I knew better. Against subtle hesitation, I married Daniel. For a while, everything looked perfect from the outside. Elegant dinners, luxury trips, a home that sparkled with wealth. Friends envied me. People whispered about how lucky I was. But behind closed doors, the cracks began to show. Daniel wasn't just ambitious, he was ruthless. Slowly, his sweetness turned into condescension. He began controlling what I wore, who I spoke to, and how I spent my time. If I questioned him, he dismissed me with a sharp tongue. If I succeeded at something, he found a way to belittle it. And then there were the women. Always just business colleagues, always innocent. But late-night messages, unexplained absences, and the smug looks on their faces told me otherwise. At first I ignored it. Then I cried about it. Finally I confronted him. That was the night he said the words that never left me. Without me, you're nothing. You'll never survive on your own. From that day on, he made it his mission to prove it. And now here we were in this courtroom where he thought he'd deliver his final blow. He paraded those women here as silent witnesses to my supposed failure, convinced he was untouchable. But there was something he hadn't counted on, my father. He had passed just 6 months earlier, and grief had hollowed me out. But in his passing, he left behind not just memories, but secrets. His will had been locked away, tangled in old family disputes and paperwork delays. I hadn't known what it contained until the attorney called me last week. And when I read the words, my knees gave way. Because my father, a man Daniel had always dismissed as irrelevant, had left behind more than love. He had left power. He had left protection. He had left a weapon strong enough to shatter Daniel's smugness forever. And in a few minutes, when the judge called on my attorney, that truth would spill into the open. Would you have walked away from a man like Daniel early on, or tried to endure and fight for the marriage like I did? Share your thoughts below. I'm curious how you'd handle it. The judge's gavel struck once, sharp and commanding, snapping me out of my thoughts. All rise. The room obeyed, the silence broken only by the shuffle of bodies standing. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, smirked and straightened his tie, looking like the king he imagined himself to be. The 3 women in red behind us crossed their legs in unison, smugness radiating from every glance they threw me. I inhaled slowly. My butter-colored dress suddenly felt too tight against my chest, the air too thin. But I kept my chin high. I had promised myself he would not see me break today. The judge looked down at the file, scanning the documents. We are here to finalize the divorce between Daniel Carter and his wife, Evelyn Carter. The words landed heavy, final. My marriage wasn't ending with tears. It was ending with spectacle. And Daniel was relishing every second. His lawyer rose, papers in hand. Your Honor, my client has been the sole provider throughout this marriage. He requests that the court recognize his contributions, granting him ownership of all major assets, including the Carter residence, vehicles, and joint accounts. Gasps rippled quietly through the room. Daniel leaned back in his chair, lips twitching with satisfaction. To him, this wasn't just about dividing property, it was about stripping me of dignity. He wanted me to walk out with nothing. The judge turned his eyes to my attorney. Do you have a response? My lawyer, Mr. Reynolds, stood calmly, adjusting his glasses. Yes, Your Honor. While my client is prepared to finalize this divorce, there are crucial documents recently entered into record that this court must review. Daniel's smirk faltered. What documents? Reynolds laid a thick envelope on the desk with deliberate care. The last will and testament of Evelyn's late father, Mr. Jonathan Hayes. The women in red shifted uncomfortably. The entire courtroom seemed to lean forward at once. Daniel scoffed. Her father? What does that old man have to do with this? He barely left her anything. That is where you are mistaken. My attorney cut in smoothly. This will, Your Honor, changes everything about today's proceedings. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Reynolds pulled out the first page, his voice steady, every word echoing through the courtroom. To my only daughter, Evelyn Hayes Carter, I leave not just the Hayes estate, but full controlling interest in Hayes Enterprises and all associated assets. Furthermore, I leave her explicit authority over all joint ventures, business holdings, and partnerships connected to her name, past, present, and future. A collective gasp swept through the room. I could feel Daniel stiffen beside me, his jaw clenching as the weight of the words sank in. My father hadn't just left me something. He had left me everything. If you were in Evelyn's place, sitting there while the will was read, how would you feel watching the man who tried to destroy you realize you now held all the power? Humiliated for him, or vindicated for yourself? Comment below. I want to know your take. For a long moment, silence gripped the courtroom. Only the rustle of paper filled the air as Mr. Reynolds slid copies of the will across the table to the judge and the opposing counsel. Daniel's face was a storm brewing behind a fragile smile. His knuckles whitened as he gripped his pen, and though he tried to look calm, his eyes betrayed him, darting, searching, calculating. This is a trick, he spat finally, his voice tight. Jonathan never trusted lawyers. He would have told me about something like this. My lawyer arched a brow. With respect, Mr. Carter, wills are not written to satisfy son-in-laws. They are written to protect the family. Daniel shot up from his chair, nearly knocking it over. This doesn't change the fact that everything we built, everything we earned, was because of me. I invested, I worked, Enough! The judge's gavel cracked sharply. Sit down, Mr. Carter. This court will not entertain outbursts. Reluctantly, Daniel sank back into his chair, but his glare drilled into me. I could feel his fury like fire against my skin. And then came the voices behind me. Well, one of the women in red whispered loudly enough for the courtroom to hear, looks like little Evelyn isn't so helpless after all. Another leaned forward, lips curved in mock sympathy. Or maybe Daddy's money is the only reason she's standing here. Their words cut like glass, but I refused to flinch. That was exactly what they wanted, to see me break. The third woman, the boldest of them all, rose to her feet. Your Honor, this isn't fair, she cried out. Daniel built his empire with his own sweat, while she lived off his success. We've all seen it. She's nothing without him. Gasps rippled across the room again. Whispers flared like wildfire. The judge frowned. Who are you, ma'am? She lifted her chin defiantly. I'm someone who knows him better than she ever did. Daniel's sharp voice cut through the room. Sit down, Olivia. His mask was cracking, panic bleeding through. But it was too late. The courtroom had heard enough. The women weren't just spectators, they were witnesses to his double life. His arrogance had paraded them here, but now their presence betrayed him. I watched him squirm, the power he once wielded slipping from his grasp. But even as his lies unraveled, I knew Daniel well enough to recognize the glint in his eyes. He wasn't finished. He was plotting. Because men like Daniel didn't surrender. They struck harder when cornered, and I could feel it. Something darker was coming. The judge's gavel slammed down again. Order in the court. If there are any further interruptions from spectators, they will be escorted out. The women in red lowered their eyes, smirking like co-conspirators. The room simmered with tension, every glance sharp enough to cut. I thought the tide had finally turned. I thought Daniel had been cornered. But then he leaned forward, his smile creeping back like a shadow returning after sunset. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, his tone shifting into calm, calculated confidence. "Before we let this little fairy tale about her father's will distract us, there's something I need to present. Something that changes everything you've just heard." My stomach dropped. Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder, thick with documents. He slid it across the table with deliberate precision, eyes locked on mine the whole time. The judge frowned, flipping through the papers. "And what exactly am I looking at here, Mr. Carter?" Daniel leaned back, voice dripping with false humility. "Evidence, Your Honor. Evidence that proves Evelyn is not the rightful heir to Jonathan Hayes's fortune. In fact," he paused, savoring the silence, "she may not even be his biological daughter." The words struck like lightning. My breath caught. The courtroom erupted in gasps, the women in red exchanging gleeful looks. "That's a lie," I blurted, my voice trembling. My heart pounded, so hard I could barely hear myself. Daniel's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, inside that folder are documents, birth records, signed testimonies, even financial transfers that suggest Jonathan Hayes was covering up another man's child. Evelyn's claim to the inheritance is, at the very least, questionable." "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, my father loved me. He raised me, Daniel leaned in, lowering his voice, so only I could hear, though his smirk told the room he was winning. "You thought you had me cornered? Evelyn, you were always too naive. You really think your father left you everything because you earned it? No. He pitied you. And once the truth comes out, even that pity won't save you." I froze, my blood cold. Was it possible? Could this be true? The memory of my father's eyes, warm and unwavering, clashed against the venom of Daniel's words. The judge cleared his throat, cutting through the noise. "These are serious allegations. The court will recess for 1 hour to allow both counsels to review and prepare a response." The gavel struck again. As the courtroom emptied, whispers swirling around me, I sat motionless. Doubt clawed at my chest. Was my entire life built on a lie? Was my father's will truly my salvation, or the cruelest deception of all? And most terrifying of all, had Daniel just found the one crack in my armor that could destroy me? If someone you trusted tried to strip away your very identity in public, your family, your name, your legacy, how would you hold yourself together? Would you fight back immediately, or crumble under the weight of the doubt? Comment below. I want to hear your thoughts. The hallway outside the courtroom felt colder than winter itself. People streamed past in hushed whispers, but I barely noticed. My body moved, but my spirit was frozen, locked in the echo of Daniel's words. "You may not even be his biological daughter." I sat on the hard wooden bench, staring down at my trembling hands. The butter-colored dress I had chosen that morning to symbolize calm and dignity now felt like a cruel joke. My chest tightened, my breath coming in short bursts. Was Daniel right? Was my father's love just pity? Flashes of memory collided in my mind, my father teaching me how to ride a bike, cheering at my school plays, holding my hand when I cried after my first heartbreak. His voice telling me, "You will always be my little girl." He never once gave me a reason to doubt. And yet, Daniel's venom was working. The seed of doubt was growing like poison in my veins. I buried my face in my palms. For the first time since this nightmare began, tears spilled freely. The strength I had clung to in that courtroom was slipping away. Across the hall, Daniel stood with the women in red, laughing quietly, their eyes darting toward me. They looked like vultures circling their prey. My humiliation was their entertainment. Mr. Reynolds sat beside me, his voice low and steady. "Evelyn, listen to me. This is his tactic. He's desperate. He's trying to break your spirit before the truth can come to light." "But what if he's right?" I whispered, my throat raw. "What if I don't belong to my father at all? What if my whole life, every memory, was built on a lie?" My lawyer sighed. "I've seen men like Daniel. They don't fight fair. They weaponize doubt. But the truth has a way of surfacing when you stand firm." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to hope. But right then, hope felt like smoke slipping through my fingers. For the first time since stepping into that courtroom, I thought about giving up. I thought about walking away, letting Daniel take everything, just to end the torment. I closed my eyes, trying to drown out the laughter behind me, the whispers, the pain. And in that darkness, for just a moment, I felt utterly alone. No father, no husband, no truth. Just me, shattered, humiliated and broken. And for the first time, I wondered if Daniel had already won. The courthouse restroom was empty and quiet, a stark contrast to the storm of voices and whispers in the hallway. I gripped the edge of the porcelain sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My face looked pale, almost unfamiliar, my eyes swollen from the tears I'd fought so hard to hide. You may not even be his biological daughter. The words looped like a cruel echo. I closed my eyes and pressed my palms against the cool countertop, trying to steady my breath. Then, soft, almost like a memory, my father's voice surfaced. Truth doesn't hide forever, Evelyn. It waits for the right moment to show itself. When it does, you'll know what to do. I opened my eyes, startled. For a heartbeat, I almost expected to see him behind me. The memory of his steady gaze filled me with warmth, stronger than Daniel's poison, louder than my doubt. My father never defined our bond by blood. He defined it by love, by action. He was the man who held my hand through every storm. That couldn't be erased by a folder of papers Daniel had dug up in desperation. And then I remembered my father's lawyer. 2 weeks before he died, Father had asked me to meet his longtime attorney, a quiet man named Samuel Greer. The meeting was brief, but Samuel had handed me a sealed letter and said only, "This is for you when the time is right." I had tucked it into my purse that very day, and then in the chaos of grief, forgotten. My heart raced. My purse. I fumbled through it with trembling hands until my fingers found the envelope, still sealed, still waiting. My breath caught as I tore it open. Inside, on my father's crisp stationery, in his unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "My Evelyn, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and someone has tried to cast doubt on who you are. Know this, blood is not what binds us. Love is. But if they need proof, Samuel holds the documents that will silence every lie. Trust him." I pressed the letter to my chest. The tears that fell now were not from despair but from something fierce and rising, clarity. Daniel's power came from my fear. But fear no longer had a place in me. I wiped my eyes, squared my shoulders, and whispered to my reflection. He can't take what my father gave me. Not love. Not truth. Not me. I walked out of the restroom, the butter yellow dress no longer feeling like a cage, but like a banner of quiet strength. In the hallway, the women in red still lingered, their mocking smiles ready. Daniel's laughter floated like smoke, but I no longer flinched. Samuel Greer was already waiting by the courtroom door, as if my father himself had summoned him. He held a slim folder, his eyes calm but bright with purpose. "Evelyn," he said softly, "your father knew this day would come. Are you ready?" I nodded, my voice steady. "Yes. Let's end this." The courtroom buzzed with quiet tension as we reconvened. The air was sharp, heavy with the scent of polished wood and the unspoken expectation of a storm. Daniel sat with a predator's calm, the women in red fanned out behind him like a living wall of crimson. He didn't even bother to hide his grin. To him, the hour-long recess had been a victory march. I stepped inside, my butter-colored dress brushing against my knees like a whisper of resolve. Samuel Greer followed, his letter folder tucked neatly beneath his arm. He nodded to me once, a silent reminder that I was not alone. The judge settled into his chair. "Counsel, the court is back in session. Mr. Carter, you presented new evidence before recess. We will now hear the response from the defense." Samuel rose with the quiet authority of a man who has weathered many storms. "Your Honor," he began, his voice carrying steady through the room, "Mr. Carter's claims are not only malicious, they are categorically false. We have in our possession primary documents that prove beyond any reasonable doubt that Jonathan Hayes is, and has always been, the legal and biological father of my client, Evelyn Hayes Carter." Daniel's grin flickered. Samuel opened the folder and laid a single sheet on the bench. "This," he said, "is a certified DNA verification conducted by Jonathan Hayes himself 3 months before his death. At his request, Both he and Evelyn submitted samples to ensure that no falsehood could ever be used against her inheritance. Gasps rippled like a sudden wind across the gallery. And, Samuel continued, sliding forward another page, here is an addendum to his will, notarized and sealed, affirming Evelyn as his sole heir and specifically warning against any fraudulent claims to the contrary. The judge adjusted his glasses and scanned the papers. His brows lifted. These are notarized and verified. Authentic. He turned his gaze toward Daniel, sharp as a blade. Mr. Carter, do you have a counter to this? Daniel's face flushed a deep, dangerous red. His mouth opened, but no words came. One of the women in red whispered too loudly, "You promised us she'd lose everything." The room erupted in startled murmurs. Daniel spun toward them, his mask cracking. "Shut up," he hissed. But the damage was already done. The judge's gavel thundered. "Order!" Samuel stepped closer to the bench. "Your Honor, my client also wishes to present evidence of financial misconduct on Mr. Carter's part, diverting marital funds to multiple private accounts, many of which appear linked to the individuals seated behind him." All three women in red stiffened. The boldest of them, Olivia, paled visibly. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Carter, these are serious accusations. This court will immediately order a financial audit and freeze all joint accounts pending investigation." Daniel surged to his feet. "You can't do this. She's lying, this is all." "Sit down, Mr. Carter," the judge barked. "Another outburst, and I will hold you in contempt." Daniel's shoulders slumped, fury boiling beneath his skin. For the first time since this nightmare began, he looked small. Samuel turned to me and gave a slight nod. It was my turn. I rose, my voice steady. "Your Honor, my father taught me that truth is not something you shout. It is something you live. My father was my family, not because of DNA, but because of love." Daniel tried to weaponize doubt to humiliate me. But today, my father's love has spoken for itself. The judge inclined his head. "The will stands. The assets remain in Mrs. Carter's control. The court will investigate Mr. Carter's financial misconduct. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck. Silence, and then the sound of Daniel's world collapsing. The women in red quickly distanced themselves, their crimson dresses suddenly less bold, their eyes full of panic. One slipped quietly toward the door, another covered her face in shame. Daniel glared at me, his eyes filled with a fury that could burn cities. But I held his gaze without fear. He had tried to humiliate me. Instead, he had exposed himself. And in that moment, my father's presence was so near I could almost hear his voice. Truth doesn't hide forever. The courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon light, a golden warmth that felt like a quiet blessing. The air smelled faintly of rain and fresh pavement. I paused at the top of the marble stairs, the chaos of the courtroom fading behind me like a storm finally spent. The women in red scattered in silence, their bold dresses no longer carrying the power they wore like armor. One hailed a cab without looking back. Another disappeared into the crowd. Their laughter, the same sharp music that had filled the courtroom earlier, was gone. Daniel emerged moments later, his once practiced swagger replaced by something brittle. For a brief second our eyes met. There was no triumph in his face now, only the dawning awareness of consequences. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it and turned away. It was not the victory I had imagined months ago, when rage was still fresh and revenge felt like oxygen. It was quieter, cleaner. Samuel Greer joined me at the landing, his leather folder now empty. "Your father would be proud," he said softly. I exhaled a breath I felt like I'd been holding for years. "He already is. I can feel it." For the first time in months, my shoulders loosened. The butter-yellow dress, which had felt like a fragile shield in that courtroom, now moved easily with the breeze, no longer a symbol of tension, but of quiet strength. A memory of my father surfaced, unbidden but welcome. The two of us in the garden one summer evening, him kneeling to prune a rose bush. "Evelyn," he had said, handing me a single perfect bloom, "beauty comes not from what survives untouched, but from what survives the pruning." The pruning was over. I turned toward Samuel. "Thank you for believing in him. And in me." He gave a gentle nod. "It wasn't a belief, Evelyn. It was knowing. He chose you for who you are, not what a piece of paper could prove. He always knew you'd be the one to carry his legacy. The late sun broke through the thinning clouds, spilling amber light across the courthouse steps. People hurried past, their lives moving forward, indifferent to the drama that had just unfolded inside. I descended the final step and stepped into the street, the city buzzing softly around me. The inheritance was safe. The truth had spoken. But more than that, something inside me had settled, a steady, unshakable quiet. My father's love was never written in DNA or sealed in legal ink. It lived in every lesson he gave, every memory we built. And now it lives in me. I lifted my face to the warm light and whispered, barely audible even to myself, "I'm free." And for the first time since he passed, I didn't feel the hollow of his absence. I felt him everywhere. Evelyn walks away not just with her father's fortune, but with the greater inheritance of peace, identity, and strength, while Daniel is left to face the consequences of his schemes. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.